Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us. Oh, yeah, I see you. Yeah. Hi. Really excited to do this. Nate and I first met, was it 2016?
Yeah, it was in Seoul, wasn't it?
No, we met before that
Did we?
in California when I was working on a story about Geguri, and it was in the early phases. Maybe no, wait.
No, it wasn't in Korea because you came out to see Apex.
That's right. Yes. Well, no, yeah, it was. But point is, it was before all of this started, because you were in the process of studying leagues, and I come from traditional sports more so, and sort of thinking through what this would all look like. So it's kind of funny to be here now after it is now a thing. It's been a thing for a couple years now, well, a year and a half or so and change, and I thought a good place to start would be to sort of reflect on the inaugural season, the first year, now that it's completed, you've got some distance from it, and to ask you, kind of looking back, what you are the most proud of accomplishing and what you think you could have done better.
It's a good question. So the inaugural season was, I don't know that we had any idea what to expect, right? We had tons of hype. You know, we had announced, selling these franchises. There was just all this attention on it. And when we came out of the gate, we came out of the gate really strong. We had some great brand partners. Like, it felt really good. And honestly, the whole season is still a bit of a whirlwind to me. But the grand finals at Barclays Center was one of the coolest, just sporting events I've ever been to. And obviously I'm a little biased, but it was just incredible. Like, just an amazing way to finish that season, to have that many people in a place celebrating Overwatch, celebrating esports. I had multiple people come up to me who have a lot of experience in that building. I won't name any names, but they said they've never heard that building so loud. I don't know if that's an indictment on the Nets or.
It sounds like a shot at the Nets. They're good now, guys. If you follow the NBA.
But it was just an awesome way to cap what was an awesome inaugural season. I'd say the thing that I was most proud of was I think that when people went and watched the Overwatch League last year on Twitch, people didn't know what to expect, but I think what people really took away was the quality, like how high quality everything was around the league. Not just the obvious things like the broadcast and the halftime shows and things like that, but everything from the team logos to the color schemes to the way the stage was lit. Like, I think there was so much attention to detail by so many people. And I think, people, it really looked like a step up for esports. And so I'm really, really proud of the team that pulled that together. And as we move into the 2019 season, we're now four weeks in. This is the 5th week. That sounds right. I should probably know that.
It's okay.
We've continued that. We've actually, made some changes to the show, but like quality remains like a super core value. And I would just say, if you're a fan of Watchpoint, which is our pregame and postgame show that we run every night, and the Watchpoint brand, which I think is eternally walking the tightrope of awesome and cringy, make sure to tune in this Saturday. I think you'll like it.
Ooh. That was a 2-part question. The second part was, what do you feel like you could have done better?
That's right. I always forget that part of the question. So I think there's a couple parts to that answer. So one is, I think we already made an obvious change, which is we switched from 40 matches to 28. Mm-hmm. I think when designing the league, we had to put a flag in the ground at some point on a number of matches, and we looked at like every sports league. And I think if you went and asked anyone who works at the NBA off the record, they would tell you they don't want to have 82 games. They would like to have fewer. I think Major League Baseball for sure would like to have less than 162. So we looked across and we thought, like, NFL is awesome because it's so scarce. And it's incredibly valuable because it's so scarce, but we thought maybe that's too few. So 40 was like a number that we felt like was a good happy medium. And it just honestly was too much. teams were playing each other too much. Like we had, players like often playing back-to-back days. Like it just was, frankly, I think too many matches. And so one of the cool things I think about building a league from scratch is we have license to, like, we're not wedded to 100 years of tradition. And so we were very quickly able to pivot to 28, which we feel like is going really well and is a really nice number. Teams are, the number of times that people play twice in a week is vastly reduced from last year. There's bye weeks now as well. So ultimately, I think it's going to result in a better product and a better league from a player perspective. And honestly, from a fan perspective too, not having to tune in to all those matches.
By the way, I should say, when we have about 10 or 15 minutes left, we'll take questions from you guys. So keep that in mind and think of some tough ones along the way. Well, so moving into this year, you said we're a few weeks in. Yeah. How is it going in terms of viewership versus last year? What are you seeing?
So we have a ton of momentum right now. I think coming out of the inaugural season, it was a great year, but we had kind of a long off season. We crowned a champion at Barclays back in July, and it wasn't until February 14th that we kicked off the 2019 season. Also, if you remember, the opening day of Overwatch League back in 2018, no one knew what it was, so we had this huge amount of interest, huge spike in viewership on the first day. But even with all of that, in our 2019 season, our opening week, we saw a 30% increase year over year in total reach. We saw a 14% increase in average minute audience. And most encouragingly to me is in our second week this year, we saw a 40% increase over the second week last year, year over year, in terms of total reach. So our audience is actually growing. There's no signs of a sophomore slump yet. Which is super encouraging. We also have added additional partners, Coca-Cola and State Farm. Honestly, Coca-Cola, State Farm, T-Mobile, Toyota, does it get more mainstream sports than that roster of sponsors? Obviously, ESPN, great partner as well. Disney, we're on Disney XD one night a week now. Stay tuned this year. We'll have more information coming soon, but there will be matches on the ABC, ESPN family of networks throughout the season, and we'll have more news on that soon. But a ton of momentum into this year, and we're excited to see where it goes.
You also expanded to 20. I wrote it down. 3 in China, 2 in Canada, 2 in US, 1 in Europe. What was the impulse behind expansion, other than expanding is good? Yeah.
So our goal, we've said this publicly, our goal is to get to 28 teams at some point. We think that's a nice number. We had an opportunity with all the momentum out of the inaugural season. There was a ton of inbound interest, and we really had our opportunity to sort of have our pick of great team owners and operators. And one of the markets that was a huge focus for us in terms of growth was China. China is the esports industry is huge in China. If you think about China, there isn't much of a traditional sporting culture in China, right? Like the Olympics is very popular. CBA has some fans. There's CSL Soccer League that's growing, but it's not like it is here in the U.S. And so esports is really, in a lot of ways, like one of the national sports of China. And so we really saw that as a market that we wanted to grow into, and had the ability to bring on 3 awesome partners in 3 amazing cities that maybe a lot of U.S. fans are not familiar with, Chengdu and Guangzhou and Hangzhou, but each of those cities on its own is bigger than basically every city in the United States except for New York. So huge markets. Opening that up was really important. Canada was also really exciting to be able to, like Toronto and Vancouver, bring those audiences in. And then teams like DC, Atlanta, and then obviously Paris. One of the coolest esports fan events I've been to. We had a Overwatch World Cup qualifier in Paris over the summer, and the entire crowd, thousands of people, when Team France was on stage, broke out and sang the national anthem in unison. People had like tears in their eyes. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. So it's super exciting to bring a team to France.
I think one of the things that confuses people who aren't familiar with esports, when I sort of explain the structure of the league and leagues in general, is the notion that teams can't just play from the city that they're based in, right? Because you'd think, oh, it's esports, you should be able to.
Yeah. It's a digital sport.
The whole point of it is that you're around the world and you're able to compete, but actually, for technical reasons that you guys all obviously know, they have to be in the same place. And so when I tell people about Overwatch League, that they're all in LA, and that they play in LA, something that they ask, and I think this is a reasonable question, is, well, then how are you able to cultivate fan bases in the cities where they're from? Like how, if they're not going there and seeing them, why should Boston or New York root for this team based in LA? And so I want to ask, based on that first year, how did you guys do that? Did you do it successfully? Did you see fans from those individual cities flocking to the teams that are associated with these cities, even though they don't actually play there?
Yeah, so the vision for the Overwatch League was always that at some point teams are going to go in their home market and play all their matches in home market. And we thought, our hypothesis was that this would work for all of the reasons it works in traditional sports. Like geographic location is such a great hook for sports fandom in every other sport that exists. And so our hypothesis was it would work in esports too over time. What sort of blew us away was how quickly it started to work. And even in the inaugural season, how fan clubs were popping up in cities around the world. Watch parties are, during opening week back in February, thousands of people around the world. There was like 3,000 people who went to a mall in Chengdu to watch the Hunters' first match. That tells me it's working. Right. This year in 2019, we're going to have our first home games in the Overwatch League. So just up the highway in Allen, Texas, last weekend in April, the Dallas Fuel will be hosting a weekend of matches. They've already sold thousands of tickets for that event. If you want to go, you better hurry up and buy tickets. Yeah. In July, we're going to go to Atlanta, and the Atlanta Reign are going to host a weekend. And then in August, we're going to take the show down the 10 freeway to LA Live, and the LA Valiant's going to host some home matches as well. So people will get their first taste of matches in a home market in 2019. But we're seeing a ton of engagement at the local level. That's all happening very organically. Fans organizing meet and greets, watch parties. The teams are doing a great job of organizing those as well. So we're excited for the future.
Well, you said that at some point your goal has always been to, how quickly can that happen?
So something that's important to remember about esports, you brought it up earlier, and I get asked every time I give a tour of Blizzard Arena to someone who's new to esports, they ask that question. They're like, well, I thought this was like digital, online. Like, why? And so what I explain is at top level professional esports, you have to play on LAN. And it's not just the technical difficulties of you could get DDoSed or something goes down, et cetera. It's to make sure the best team wins. There is no latency, no input lag, nothing. It is a sort of pristine competitive environment. And that's the way that you have to run these tournaments. So we've been talking a lot. We've been working on this for really 2 years now, is how do we actually, it's one thing if you think about traditional sports leagues, to have a league that travels around a country. Our league will have to travel around the world. And so we've been spending a bunch of time thinking about that. And actually what we're going to announce today at South by Southwest is that next season in 2020, all teams will be returning to their home markets, and all matches will be played in one of the 20 cities, I guess 19 cities because we have 2 LA teams, around the world. So it's super exciting to be able to start talking about this because it's something we've been working on for a long time. But next year, all the teams will leave LA, go back to their home markets, and host half of their games at a home venue. You're
going from all in LA in one fell swoop to all of these teams playing in the cities with all of the associated infrastructure and scheduling and
Yeah. Well, when you say it that way, it sounds scary, but.
I mean, it is. It's a lot, especially given that, as you mentioned, it's global. It's not just. All right, I have a million questions about how that's going to work. The first of which is, how is it going to work? Like that seems. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot.
So. Break this down into a couple pieces. So the first piece is like scheduling, right?
Right.
Which is I don't know if for the sports fans in the room, like if you actually realize how complex of a problem scheduling a sports league is. There are all the traditional sports leagues have like data scientists who are full time. It used to be back in the day, they would do 2 guys would go into a conference room for 6 months and do the NFL schedule using pen and paper and Post-it notes. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's like supercomputers and data scientists, because when you start to count in, venue availability, things that you want to minimize for, if you want to minimize for back-to-backs or travel, recovery time, all of those, it gets very, very complex. So something we've been working on for quite a while is what does that schedule look like? And if you look at the format of our league today, we have the Atlantic Division and the Pacific Division. So that format will continue. And just like if you're an American League baseball team, you play against teams in the American League more often than you play interleague play. We will run a similar format. So Pacific Division teams will play more of their matches against Pacific Division. Atlantic will play more of their matches against Atlantic Division, which is, by the way, the way it works today. Division should be important. It's not just a made-up construct. It actually makes a lot of sense when we're in that home and away format. So the divisions will be a big part of it.
So you're not going to have New York flying to Seoul, frequently?
Yeah, so New York will fly to Seoul, but the difference is just like when the Knicks play the Lakers, they don't go play the Lakers, then fly back and play Boston, right? They go play the Lakers, then they play the Clippers, then they play the Warriors. Like they do a West Coast swing, and our league will run similarly. So when teams go to play in China or in Asia broadly, they will go play multiple matches before they fly back, and then also have homestands as well. So when they're home, there will be a period of time that they're home. It's really taking a page out of traditional sports scheduling, and we're lucky in that we have so many owners in our league that do this already, that have home venues and know how to do this, and it's been incredible to be able to leverage that expertise to help us develop our schedule.
Right. So yeah, you guys have some owners who already own venues, and that brings me to my next question, which is, what kind of venues will you be looking at to do this? Have you already figured out some of them, and size, the nature of them, that kind of thing?
Yeah. So the teams are driving the venue piece. So just backing up to why we think this is important, and this isn't, in my view, an important step just for the Overwatch League. It's an important step for esports, because if you look at the esports club model today, where everyone's playing either in a central studio or online, the business model is really like global sponsorships. They're all competing for global sponsorships. There's some merch dollars there, and they're monetizing content, right, through YouTube and Twitch and other platforms. But if you look at the way that teams drive revenue in traditional sports, it's because they have a venue. They can sell tickets, and not just tickets, they can sell VIP experiences and boxes and all of those things, concessions, parking, merchandise, and local sponsorship, which to date has had no reason to invest in esports. If you go to Texas Rangers game or something, the local Ford dealer is one of the sponsors of the team. The local Ford dealer has no reason to sponsor the Dallas Fuel yet, but when Dallas is playing multiple matches in Dallas, they totally will. So that's really exciting, we think, just to open up more revenue opportunities for teams and really help us take esports to the next level. From a venue perspective, I think you're going to see a wide range of venues, not just in terms of size, but also in terms of type of venue. So if you think about, it's possible that the venue in Boston might be smaller than the venue in Chengdu, right? Where you have 20 million people that live in the city, and half of them are under the age of 35. So I think it'll take different forms. There's also, markets where regular esports competition has really never happened before. And there's markets where it happens every day. Like if you think about Seoul, like going to an esport competition, and if you're a kid who lives in Seoul, is not strange. You probably do it all the time. So I think it'll take different shapes and sizes. But just like traditional sports, what's cool is every team's going to have an opportunity to put their own stamp on that venue and create a place where every fan can go and have sort of that like ultimate expression of their fandom, and fans from all over the world can aspire to go to this place. And I think we'll have, just like in baseball, you have Wrigley and you have Dodger Stadium and Yankee Stadium, and they're all different. The field of play is the same, but everything around them is different. I think you'll see that in the Overwatch League as well. And one of the reasons we wanted to announce this, I guess we're 11 months away from this starting, is we wanted to sort of get out of the way and let our teams actually get out and start talking about their plans and start talking to their community about what they want to build in those cities. You mentioned 11 months. So is the schedule going to be the same despite this massive undertaking? Yeah. So in just the same way, one of the coolest things I think about traditional sports is tradition, right? And even if you don't care about football at all, late August, early September, you know it's football season. Like it's starting, especially if you live in Texas. It's probably unavoidable. Like that's really cool, and we want to build that same level of tradition over time. So yeah, our sort of steady state schedule starting next year when we go home and away will be February to August.
You described in depth the infrastructure challenge in terms of the venues and how it's going to be incumbent on the teams to evaluate their marketplaces and think about like what works, how many people, how it's going to vary. What about the challenges from a people perspective in terms of, flying groups of 20-year-olds around the world? I mean, that you talked about the NBA. That's something they spend a lot of time thinking about in terms of back-to-backs, player health, how to do it. Like, have you guys, I'm sure you have thought it through, but what do you anticipate being some of the changes you need to make to accommodate those challenges?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've, the format of our league, it's broken into stages. So we basically have 5 weeks of play, and we take a week off. And one of the very practical things that does for us is that it gives us time to patch the game. And so, we're in week 5 of stage 1 right now. We'll have stage playoffs next week, and then we'll have a week off. And in that week, we will patch the game. Balance changes. There's often, new maps, new heroes, things like that. So those breaks are already built into our schedule, and they'll be incredibly beneficial to us when we go home and away, because it'll be give us extra time for players. Like, one of the big concerns that we have is if you are based in Dallas, but you need to go play an Asia swing, when you come back to Dallas, like I do that all the time, you need 3 or 4 days to sort of get back on the right time zone, like have your body readjust. So we're going to build in breaks into the schedule, the existing stage breaks plus additional breaks as well, so that when teams come back from international travel, they have extra time to recover from that. And, it seems like one of the big topics in traditional sports right now is recovery and sleep training and all of those things. And I think you're seeing that happen in esports as well. One of the exciting things about esports to me is it's still relatively nascent. And I don't think anyone has actually figured out what is the optimal way to train esports players. But you're seeing a lot of our ownership groups that have roots in traditional sports start to leverage some of the things that they're doing with their football, basketball, and baseball athletes and applying that to esports. And sleep training is absolutely a huge part of it. And if you think about it, it's even bigger for an esport player because they're staring at a monitor. And because you'd probably do this all day too, like that totally jacks your sleep schedule. So I think our teams are really being thoughtful about how they're going to set up training facilities and physical training and sleep training and recovery for their players, but we're building that into the schedule so that players have that time built in.
I want to talk more about the importance of localization and that physical presence, because in some ways it feels so counterintuitive in 2019, right? Because you know what I mean? Like that we think about, when you think of esports, you think of like, oh, it's so awesome that a kid in China can watch this happening in LA, and that's so great. But it feels like in a lot of fields, including traditional sports, actually being grounded, having a physical presence, having these big events like South by, or music festivals is more important than ever. Like how much do you see this potentially growing local fan bases, having that sort of physical presence, a place for them to go, a team to root for in their hometown?
I think it's huge. I think the generation of people under the age of 35, they crave and want experiences. And watching online is an experience. Like being in Twitch chat is definitely an experience. But it's the going and sitting at Barclays Center with 12,000 other people who love Overwatch is a totally different level of experience. And so what I've seen in the year and a half that we've been running this is I have so many people that I talk to, especially young people, who say, I've never really been into esports before. I love games. I play a ton of games, and because I didn't really know how to engage with it. But there's a team in Houston, and I'm from Houston, so I'm in, right? Like the best example of this, I think, is if you remember, because the grand finals were on ESPN1, And you always have like one of the oldest traditions in esports now for 4 or 5 years is when a mainstream media outlet says we're doing an esports thing, and then all the Twitter mentions are like, well, this isn't sports, what are you doing? Like there's that whole thing. The number one reply to @ESPN when they tweeted about where grand finals will be live in primetime, the number one response was, I have no idea what this is, but it says Philly, so I'm in.
Yeah.
Which that's awesome. Like that's so cool. Like that.
Yeah.
Like that. And it's true. Like that fandom exists. Like people want to root for their home team,
their city. Yeah.
And I think being able to in cities around the world, like right now, unless you live in LA, Seoul, or Shanghai, or maybe Berlin, there's no way that you can really go on a regular basis and interact with other people who love esports. Like it doesn't exist.
Right.
And like I've seen there's so much power in creating an environment where people can come together and connect, because so many people who love gaming and esports, they're actually not sports fans. You know, we look at the data of Overwatch viewers, and you know, it's only a relatively small percentage that also regularly watches traditional sports. So this is for a lot of our fans their thing, and it's a huge affirmation of that this thing that they love and the thing that they engage with is now at this prominent level, and there's a place where they can go and connect with other fans who are just like them. If you think about, you know, I grew up in San Diego Padre fan, which is generally a pretty awful thing to be.
Things are turning around.
It's turning. Farm system looks pretty good, although we just spent apparently every penny that we'll ever make on one player. But when thinking back to the last year they were good in 1998, going to a playoff game like that was crazy special, because it was like, you know, 50,000 people who all like have this connection because we love this team and this game, and the energy in the building. It's like you get goosebumps. Like it's amazing, right? And to be able to have that now on a regular basis for esports fans and gamers, I think is incredibly powerful. And I'm very confident that it's going to be successful, because I know there's fans out there that want to have that experience for them.
Interesting. I'm sure when you look at, you're able to see data we don't see in terms of viewership for individual matches, where it's coming from. It's the fact that, like, when, you know, Philly's playing, if a lot of suddenly lights are going off in Philly, are you seeing like trends there, and do you anticipate that changing even more once this new structure kicks in? Yeah,
for sure. I think if you look at our viewership, we have a ton of viewership in China, and even more now that we have 4 teams there. But our viewership is incredibly strong in the U.S. And I think if you look at across all of esports, we over-index, I think, on viewership in the U.S. versus a lot of other esports, and I think one of the reasons is because we have such a strong foothold in North America with so many city-based teams across the U.S. and Canada, and we see really strong viewership, and we're starting to see some of the numbers come in on Disney XD, and they're really good as well. So you know, our fans are incredibly engaged. I think one of the things that attracts an ESPN to the Overwatch League is the demographic. Like, you know, you guys your audience is getting older. How do we attract younger viewers? But the stickiness is a huge part of it. And then coupled with that, the idea that, like, it's a little bit more translatable for traditional sports fans. Back to my "it says Philly and I'm in" comment.
Right.
Like, I had, you know, we've had some meetings in Bristol. Hard to get to, by the way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Seriously. Yeah.
That is not close to anything.
You might not want a team there. Yeah.
But you know, I've had some meetings with some folks there where, you know, we walk through what we do, and they're like, I love it. I actually understand this. Like, it's, you know, LA plays New York, and there's a regular season and a playoffs and an all-star game.
Yeah.
Like, that is super intentional. And I think we're hopeful that, you know, once we get in the local market, we'll start to see local media, whether that's newspapers, radio stations, start to also engage in this and have it, you know, sort of set roots in the community.
That's an interesting point, right? Because, you know, the Philadelphia paper's not going to come out to LA and watch every game, even if they can, and you don't really understand it until you're there. I want to ask you just one more thing about this kind of infrastructure you're setting up, because really it is an infrastructure. These teams they're going through all the trouble to do, you know, create a venue, Do you see that clearing the way for additional games like Call of Duty that perhaps might also want to emulate what you're setting up with Overwatch League?
Yeah, I think there are, if you look across our ownership group, there's most of the ownership groups have teams in other games as well, whether that's franchise leagues or non-franchise leagues. We announced on earnings call last month that we're going to be doing a city-based league for Call of Duty. So there's opportunity there. I think absolutely you will see organizations that have home stadiums that they use for multiple games.
Yeah.
And it's possible that it'll look slightly different depending on what game's there. The good news is, most of what an esports stage is LED, so you can sort of make it look like whatever you want. We have 13,000 pixels wide of LED in Blizzard Arena, so it can be anything. But I absolutely think that will be a trend, and that you'll see. I've even seen, construction spec sheets for new theaters and things that are going up in Vegas and Los Angeles and New York, and even architecture companies are now putting like esports functionality as a thing that they want built into venues, because it's something that I think you're going to see more and more around the country and around the world.
And it's all about having right-sized venues, like, for fans of MLS or soccer, it doesn't feel right when it's in a giant stadium. You want to make sure it's optimized for the actual sport that's being played there.
Baseball went through a 20-year transition for that, right? To huge stadiums, to more, 40,000 seat stadiums. So I think I can't say what is the perfect size for esports yet, because
sounds like a very city to city.
I think it'll vary city to city.
In some ways, yeah.
I do think you'll see a range, somewhere. Sort of theater, concert venue, like that sort of size venue, I think is what you'll see to start. But I think, nobody has any illusions that we're going to be selling out Staples Center every night in year one. That's not our goal, and would not be realistic. But, the idea is to build this over time, and maybe someday down the future we are.
Do you know when we're going to start hearing about where the cities, the venues, and that kind of thing?
I think you'll start hearing about it pretty soon. I think the teams have put in a ton of work on this, and are making a lot of progress. Announcing that we're doing this today doesn't mean we're announcing that we're starting working on it. We've been working on it for quite a while, and there's been a tremendous amount of progress. One thing that the league will do is the teams are going to be responsible for the venue and putting on the event and selling tickets and all those things. The league will still be responsible for the broadcast. We think it's incredibly important that we have consistent look and feel from stadium to stadium when you're watching from home. If you think about an hour and 45-minute Overwatch League match, the vast majority of the time that you spend watching that is gameplay, and so we need to make sure that is consistent from arena to arena.
I want to shift gears a little bit, because we've been talking about how being in cities, having a physical local presence is such an important part to growing fan bases, growing interest in the league. But also, I think beyond that, there are many things that it takes to grow a fan base, but one of those things is having stories, having stars, having a few recognizable, your LeBron, your Steph. And I wanted to ask you, because I know that's something that you've been thinking about a lot, and we talked about when you were in the early stages. How have you gone about cultivating that side of the league, growing interest in storylines and stars?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I would admit that it's something that and I don't think anyone in esports has nailed this one yet. It's something that we need to do better on. I think last year, it was our first year. We didn't really know who the stars were going to be. Yeah. 0 people in the world predicted JJoNak would be the MVP. 0 people. Anyone who says that they did is lying to you. And so there's no way we could have been oh, let's make sure we're featuring JJoNak, right?
Yeah.
So I think we now though have a season's worth of data, and we're now seeing through increased focus on analytics and more data that we're collecting, not just in terms of viewership, but in terms of merch sales and websites visits and all these things, and we can start to see where fandom is coalescing around players. And I think you're going to start to see us lean much more into that in the future. I also think it's a big role of the teams. And the teams have done a pretty good job of this so far, but it's something I think once we're in the local market that you'll see them really put their foot on the gas on. And, I get asked all the time, and I'll just preemptively answer the question, like, well, New York is all Korean players or London's all Korean players. Yeah. Like, I don't really think it matters. I don't think anyone, like, if the Yankees win the World Series, our fans are going to be like, oh, well, none of those guys are from New York. Like, literally 0 people will say that.
Right.
They're just happy to win a championship. So I'm not sure it matters. And I think once players get in the local market, they will actually start to assimilate into that community and be a part of it. So I'm really excited to see how the team sort of invest in that. But to me, one of the huge advantages I think that esports has over traditional sports is if I'm a kid sitting at home and I'm watching the Overwatch League and I look at Carpe, who is an amazing player, like, I don't look at Carpe and be like, I could never be that. Like, Carpe is like 5'0", 100 and nothing. Like, he's not LeBron. He's he didn't win the genetic lottery. He won it in a different way.
Yeah.
But he didn't win it in the like I have 4% body fat and could have a 44-inch vertical way, which I think makes it incredibly aspirational and feel like attainable.
Right.
Like and make the connection that I have with my favorite players so much closer. I think the social media and streaming also exacerbates that. I think like it's cool that LeBron goes live on IG from the back of his Maybach singing like Pusha T songs, but can I relate to that? Like, I don't know. I don't have a Maybach. Like, I like Pusha T, but I don't know. It's like it's very strange. Like, it doesn't feel super relatable. It's cool. It's cool content. But if I go home and I'm a big Surefour fan, and I watch Surefour stream, and I'm one of 5,000 other people watching Surefour stream, and I'm chatting, and every now and again he replies or calls out a question. It's like, oh my god, like we're friends, like we have this connection, right? And that is so powerful. Yeah. And I think people from the traditional sports world miss that point a lot, and actually are trying to really catch up. And I think you'll see, like the NBA, I think has been the best at this in getting their players to really lean in and engage on social media. Like, honestly, like is PJ Tucker good at basketball? I'm actually not sure. I just know he has lots of awesome sneakers because like he posts them on Instagram every night.
Yeah.
But there are more players in traditional sports need to do that. Our players are already they're experts at that already. Yeah. Like, they're experts at engaging with the community. And so I think the stars will emerge. They're already emerging. But I think it's a combination of what that player is doing, what the teams are doing, and then what the league can do to sort of pour gas on that fire.
To get their stories out, to get their personalities out. Because it seems to me that stardom, honestly, very similarly to traditional sports, it's not just who are the best players. Okay, they're the biggest stars. That's not true in the NFL. It's not true in the NBA. And it doesn't seem to be true in Overwatch League either. It seems like it's very personality-based. I mean, you mentioned the teams are trying to get that out, trying to get their stories out. How do you feel about the coverage in terms of, generating interest in some of the players?
Well, your personality is a big piece of it. I think it's a huge piece in traditional sports too. Like, I live in Orange County. Like, Mike Trout is like maybe the greatest baseball player who's ever lived. Yeah. Like, no one he's like
he could walk in here and
no one would know. Like, and like, honestly, like, I don't see kids running around Orange County with Mike Trout jerseys. Right. I see a lot of kids running around town wearing Cristiano Ronaldo jerseys. And it's interesting. I think the personality has so much to do with it, and we're seeing that already. Like, the top selling jersey in the league this year is DeFran. DeFran, for those who don't know, has a very colored past. But it's actually a really cool redemption story from a player that had some issues. He went and got them addressed. He's sort of turned it around and is actually one of the not just like the most popular player in the league, but actually one of the most talented players in the league. And I think that combination of personality and talent, you see that with Surefour, who's another incredibly popular player. Poco is a very popular player. And even, I think one of the emerging stars in the league right now is a player named Bumper, who plays for the Vancouver Titans, who basically beats everyone and then goes and does post-game interviews and tells the people he just beat how bad they were. which like you need that. You need villains
Yeah.
and heroes and everything in between, right? So I think we're starting to see more of that. But personality is huge, and something that I think I try very hard and make sure that everyone on our content team and our whole team, like we will often joke, let's not be the no fun league.
Yeah.
Like let's make sure, like at the end of the day, we're playing video games. Let's not take ourselves too seriously, and give our players the chance to express themselves and have some personality. And look, like sometimes that will go too far, and then I have to write letters and and things like that. But for the most part, you know, I think it's been really great, and I think like being able to, whether it's post-game interviews, whether it's something that we do that's really cool that I think has been awesome for fans is we do a Twitch AMA with a player at the end of a broadcast where fans can actually go and write questions on Twitch and we answer them in real time. Like that type of interaction I think is really cool and lets the players' personalities come out. Because a lot of times if you think about our players, you know, the average age of a player in the league is around 20. And I think it's only that high because you have to be 18 to play in the league. And, you know, there's a lot of players in the league, 18, 19 years old, who prior to being in the Overwatch League lived at home with their parents. And so it's not like we were talking last night, you're working on a piece on Zion, right? Like Zion has probably been doing interviews since he was 12 years old. Like he knows how to talk to the media. He knows what to do. And when he gets to the NBA, he's going to already have years and years of practice of talking to reporters, being on camera, interacting with fans. Like he's going to know how to do that. Our players don't have that history for the most part. And so we've done a lot of work to help train them. I know our teams invest a ton there as well. But it's all about giving them a safe place where they can express themselves and have that personality come out, because I think that's what we're seeing is that popularity is very much tied to personality.
It's personality, yeah. I mean, so in my mind, growing the league, it's, you know, the local fan base, building stars, personality, but also all of the conversation around the league. You mentioned the NBA being sort of a good model for generating interest online. There was this great quote this year from Steve Kerr, the coach of the Warriors. He was asked about some of his players complaining about drama and gossip being the focus of the NBA media. And he said, look, I would love it if fans just wanted to hear about pick and roll defense, but we know that they actually, like, they love drama. This is a soap opera. And do you feel like that same dynamic potentially applies to the league, where fans, they are interested in rivalries and drama and player movement and those sorts of things around the league?
Oh, 100%. I mean, like, we've already had, it happens all the time. We had, you know, Fisher, who played for London and then got traded to the Gladiators and then, like, didn't play in the playoffs and then got traded to Seoul, and, like, that we already have our villains. We already have some of the wholesome heroes. We have sort of everything in between, and fans totally love it. Like it's absolutely. And one of the things that we've tried to do is give players a place where they can express that. So one of my favorite pieces of content that we'll do is when we have a matchup coming up, and we'll go shoot a video where we just get a couple players to talk about each other. And you don't really have to do much more than say, you know, what do you think about player X? And then you usually get some pretty spicy video. And that's what fans want to see. To your point, like, yes, we get good engagement on our articles where we break down what dive composition is, but we actually get better engagement on articles where we break down, like, the top hairstyles in the league, or, like, just fun stuff, right? Like, like, again, at the end of the day, we're playing video games. Like, so I think that is definitely an important part of it.
I want to ask you one last question before we open up to questions, which is, you mentioned Disney XD, you guys have ABC around the corner, and something that I know I've thought a lot about whenever I've written about esports is balancing, and it's a very difficult balance, the need to write for the core audience that already knows the game, that's interested in the technical aspects of what's happening, with appealing to a mainstream audience, not dumbing it down, but appealing to them. And I know that it's a very complicated thing, and it's something I know you think about a lot. I was wondering, going into this more mainstream presentation, do you anticipate any changes in how you are presenting the game, and not just the game, but everything around the game?
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that we spend a ton of time on. So I would say in the inaugural season, we made the decision to focus on, we had to kill it with our core fans. Like that was, you're dead on arrival if you don't do that. Right. So we were very conscious about, like, we need to make content in our inaugural season that people who love Overwatch will love this content. And I think we did a good job of that. I think you'll start to see, and you saw a little bit at our grand finals broadcast, but, and you're right, it's not dumbing it down, it's explaining it, right? Yeah. We can't assume that somebody who's never played Overwatch knows what a hybrid map is. We need to tell them what a hybrid map is. And so you'll start to see more content that we'll produce that we'll play around the match. Like, even, you know, if the Super Bowl goes to overtime, they still put up the graphic that says, here's the overtime rules of the Super Bowl. Because they know that there's millions of people watching who actually have no idea what those rules are. So we need to start doing a better job of creating content around the matches that help explain what is going on. Replay is a huge piece of that. I think we have incredible replay tools that allow us to sort of speed things down, slow them up, change the angle to explain those. And then I think the casters play a huge role. We're super lucky in that we have amazing talent that works on the Overwatch League. And, you know, they are often for them, it's really easy for them to get super inside baseball with the way that they talk about the game. And so when we are on Disney, when we are on ESPN, we definitely make a conscious effort to, we can say things like, hey, they're going with a 3-3, but we need to explain what that means and why it's good or why it's important. So they do an awesome job of that, and I think it's really a combination of those types of factors that help us break that down. And I, you know, I'd be lying if I said we've like 100% nailed that. It's something that we're going to continue to work on.
Nice. All right, so we've got 14 minutes. So I think there's a mic in the middle of the room right there, right? I don't know. You guys gonna line up? Oh, there we go.
Yep, there we go. We got some lines.
Hi. So we were talking about the viewer experience, and I think one of the things that's really been positive about the 2019 season is the All Access Pass on Twitch, and the fact that we have these player point of views that we can go to, and I think the big question for that is when we're going to get player point of view VODs, because I've been trying to do some analysis, you know, work with my friends to see how we can improve our own personal game based on what the pro players are doing, and it's hard to see sometimes just based on the one perspective we get in the replays. Yeah,
so for those of you who don't know, All Access Pass is a product that you can purchase to enhance your Overwatch League experience on Twitch. And what it does is it enables you to watch every match from any player first-person point of view, which is really cool because you can kind of curate your own viewing experience. I would say, in general, we want to do more things like, if it's first-person VODs, things like that to enable community content creators, or not even just community content creators, but just like you and your friends that want to get better at the game. It's something that we are working on. I don't have a timeline on it, but I know it's something that we definitely want to do at some point in the future.
Great, thanks.
Hello. A couple months ago, Mark Cuban mentioned player burnout in relation to how the game changes. Esports in general change every couple of weeks, months. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree, disagree with him? And sort of how do you guys manage as a sort of a league perspective an ever-evolving game done by a group of developers?
Yeah. Well, that was an interesting moment because I learned a lesson that I think many other people have learned, which is don't reply to Mark Cuban on Twitter, because he definitely will reply back. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh shoot, am I in a Twitter fight with Mark Cuban? Is this what's happening right now? I think he raises a good point. I think his point though assumes that the fact that the game is constantly evolving is a negative thing. I would offer that it's actually a positive benefit. I think, like, as a baseball fan, I wish baseball evolved more. Like, I can't get my kid to go sit with me for 3 hours and watch a baseball game. You literally cannot handle it. And so I think the fact that the game is constantly changing and evolving is a huge benefit. I think it's exciting for viewers. I think if you talk to players, they also like it. Like it's one of the ways that you measure a great esport team is their ability to adapt to a constantly changing meta and environment. So I think it's a huge benefit for us. I think the player burnout issue is a separate one. I don't think it's necessarily tied to the evolution of the game, but it's something we were talking about this earlier. I think that the teams are really, I know all of our teams are investing heavily in infrastructure around the players to help make sure that they are not just going and sitting at a computer terminal and playing games for 10 hours, but there's actually structure and a program around that not just includes screaming video games, but includes physical training and sleep training and mental conditioning and all of those things.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you anticipate expansion into feeder leagues in the vein of Major League Baseball, that kind of thing, down to even amateur leagues that are sponsored?
Yeah, I think so. We run Overwatch Contenders right now in 7 different regions, which one of the things that I am proud of in our 2019 season is, a bunch of new players came into the league, and they came in through our contender system, which tells me that that's working pretty well. What we need to do a better job on is extending that to all levels of amateur play. So there's a lot of talk. I know Delane will be here tomorrow talking about high school. Like, we own a thing called TESPA that started here in Austin, Texas, by the way, that does collegiate esports. But to me, it's not just about, oh, what about high school? What about college? It's like amateur competition. Because it's the whole level, right? Like, I am flying home tonight because I got to go coach a flag football game for some reason. I don't know how I got signed up for that. Hopefully we win. I don't have a playbook yet. Doing that on the plane. But at some point that will exist for esports too, right? There's kids playing these games, and just in the same way that it's healthy for a kid to have extracurricular activities like gymnastics or swimming or football, there's no reason that competitive gaming can't be a part of that mix. So I would say we've been super busy over the last 2 years launching Overwatch League, and had to really focus on getting that right. But amateur competition is definitely something that I'm super focused on, that we're evolving not just for Overwatch but across the Blizzard portfolio.
Fantastic.
Hi guys, thank you both for coming out today. First of all, PJ Tucker, great basketball player, shoe game better than his basketball ability, I'll say that. Going back to the Disney XD point, you said once a week games are going to be broadcast on Disney XD. I was wondering what the age demographics are for the Overwatch League and how that translates to Disney XD.
Yeah, so we think XD is a great partner because Overwatch is a game that's really broadly appealing, right? So it's a T-rated game. We have a pretty young audience that plays, and I'd say really we think of the sweet spot of our audience. It's like 13 to 24. Is really tons and tons of fans, and it's so cool. So I mentioned I'm a flag football coach, which is strange, but the first practice, 2 of the kids on my team, they already knew who I was. These are 9-year-olds, by the way, and they watch on Disney XD. Like their parents let them watch like on Disney XD, and because they're already watching that network, they know what Overwatch is. It's again, the game is like this bright, colorful, like it's super appealing, and it's I think all the content around the league, we're very thoughtful about making sure that the content we produce is suitable for an audience like you'd see on XD. So I think they're a great partner for us. I always tell the team, look, the business that we're in, it's the making dreams come true business. It's the smiles business, right? Like if we can get fans at a young age and engage them, I know for a fact that there's kids that live in LA and Dallas and New York and Boston. The first sports jersey they've ever bought in their life is an Overwatch League jersey. That's super cool, and it also is a big responsibility for us. And it's awesome to have partners like Disney XD to help build that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a voice actor from San Diego and also a really sad Padres fan for many years. I was curious about your relationship with other video game companies. Insofar as in this panel, I heard a lot about how you're furthering the Overwatch League, but also esports in general. Do you work with other video game companies in the medium to sort of collectively decide what works, what doesn't work, or is it more competitive?
I don't think we don't work directly with other publishers on esports initiatives. I would say there's lots of initiatives that we work with other publishers on through the ESA, which is Entertainment Software Association, which we're a member of, and most of the other big publishers are a member of. But I think esports as an industry right now is at the point where we're at the rising tide lifts all the boats phase of the industry, where anything that we do that's good is good for everyone in the esports industry. Anything that League of Legends does, or Fortnite, or Apex Legends, any of these games, it's all good. I get asked all the time, like, oh, aren't you worried about Fortnite or worried about this? It's like, no, that's awesome. That's more people playing games. It's more people engaging and realizing that it's still crazy to me that I have to explain to people that video games is a mainstream activity. I think the total software revenue for video games in 2018, like the entire industry, no hardware, just software, was over $120 billion. That's like 4 or 5x Hollywood. So this is as mainstream as, there's nothing more mainstream than playing video games.
Thanks.
Hey, I like a lot of the changes from last year to this year, but one of the things that when I show like my friends the league, when it's 03 and they go 04, a lot of my friends go, well, why are they?
It's called
playing?
04 Overwatch. That's what it's
Yeah, Overwatch. And so then I have to say, well, it's for map differential,
Yeah.
so for playoff implications, and then the announcers will defend it too. And oh, why are we playing game 4? So like, was that something that you guys had a big discussion over? Like, should we keep it 04?
We're always having big discussions about it. So here's what drove the decision. I think it's very important that if we say that your favorite team plays at 3 o'clock, that if you tune in at 3 o'clock, your favorite team is starting their match. And so what playing 4 maps does is it allows us to have very consistent broadcast times from match to match. And also because of the way the league's structured with differences in head-to-head matches and playoff seeds based on overall record, not just conference record, we needed a tiebreaker that's applicable to each of the teams, and so it works for that. I would say, like everything else on the Overwatch League, there's nothing that we're doing today that's not a conversation that we're having internally about, is this the right thing to do? You'll even see like stage playoffs next week. We have 8 teams this year in stage playoffs, which is super cool, like full bracket. Our playoff format this year, in the end of the season, last year we did these sort of 2-day series. This year we're going to do full, double elimination. So everything's constantly evolving, and I would say that one's evolving too, but it's really about making sure that we could have a consistent schedule for fans.
Cool. All right, thanks.
Hello, Jacob.
Hi. So I don't think it's any secret that in terms of PC gamers that play shooters, that Overwatch has lost a lot of market share since it first came out in terms of people who play generally. And obviously that does correlate to how many people are interested in the game and then also interested in the esports title. Probably one of the biggest questions for Overwatch now is, will it go free to play? When will it go free to play? And how do you think that relates to the interest in the esport?
Yeah, it's a good question. We don't have any, it's not something that we are talking about at this point. I would say Overwatch as a franchise is really just getting started. If you think about Blizzard Entertainment and the other franchises that we have, I mean, it's amazing to me still the engagement that we have around World of Warcraft and even StarCraft, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary last year, right? You still have KSL going on in Korea. You still have all of this stuff happening. So I'd say Overwatch as a franchise is just getting started. I can't comment on where that evolves over time. But I know, the team that works on the game has lots of plans for the future, and I think Overwatch as the game is in a great position now to continue to grow for decades to come.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming and being here, and I wanted to ask if there will ever be an Austin team, and what future places would you like to start a franchise in?
Great question. So you have Houston is kind of your Austin team. Last year at South by, there was a big Houston Outlaws thing here. You also have Dallas, which is very close. So I would offer that you have 2 teams, and you can choose which one is the Austin team. Future expansion, I don't know. Based on my Twitter mentions, it sounds like there's lots of interest in Chicago or some Midwest team, which I agree. Like, at some point, yeah, we would love to have a team in Chicago. Germany is another place where we want to have a team for sure. A city like Berlin could be amazing. Also, the Nordic region, I don't know if people know, but like Sweden, Denmark, Finland is like a hotbed of not just gaming, but really great talent. You could see another team someday in Korea. You could see a team in Southeast Asia. So we're sort of looking everywhere. But you got a Dallas Fuel? Yeah. See, you already picked your Austin team.
Thank you.
Hi. I want to second the notion for a Midwest Overwatch League team. We have no representation anywhere. It would be great. So I wonder, are there any future plans or vision to expand to include any kind of console division or reach out to those players that maybe just play on console?
It's a good question. It's something we've talked about. I think you could see us doing some things in the future around it. Nothing that we've cemented yet. We know there's a big player base there, and it's something that's definitely on the table that you could see us start to explore in the future. But no plans at this time.
Okay, thank you.
I think we're out of time.
Maybe last question.
Last question.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm a big fan of both traditional sports and esports as well, and I guess with esports, I think some of the interesting obstacles that come in place is with football, for example, you're never going to have a football 2 or a football 3, right? But with Overwatch or other games, do you guys have some contingency plans in place to address that, or worry about?
Yeah. Well, I addressed this a little bit earlier, but I like your question assumes there's some negative aspects of new versions or evolution. Again, I think that's a really positive thing from a fan and viewer perspective. I would say, what we've seen in esports is, you take Counter-Strike or StarCraft are great examples. The version of those franchises that are played competitively today are different than the ones that came out in the 90s. But the sport is still relatively consistent, and what you see with those is that competitive activity and esports activity can really keep games popular in perpetuity. I mean, we've seen that throughout the history of the industry now. So, again, we're excited about the way the game will continue to evolve, and I think that's a huge positive benefit for esports.
Thank you.
No questions for Mina, by the way.
I know. It's very hurtful. Okay.
I'll ask you a quick question.
Oh, no.
As someone who covers traditional sports, what is it about esports that is interests you?
I think I didn't truly understand it, and this cuts to maybe the conversation we had today, until I went to an event, right? And when I did my first story in 2015, and you're surrounded by hundreds or thousands of people, and you see how much they love it, and when you see it through their eyes, you start to love it, and you start to understand it, and you react. I tell this people, you won't understand the game until you go to an event, because you see the things people are reacting to, the way they're reacting, the emotion. It's actually not that dissimilar from the experience of watching traditional sports, and once I had that experience, I think I started to really enjoy it in the way that they did. Guys, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody.